Brandy Lovelady Mitchell. I am an APC co-chair and the 4th through 12th grade work group co-chair.
And I'm Stacy Stowe. I was honored to be asked to act as APC co-chair this November, and I'm a proud member of the KConnect Board of Trustees. If this is your first time attending an APC, please leave us a note in the chat so we can welcome you. And from all of us, welcome. Before we get started, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank some of our partners who make all of this possible. Our work group co-chairs, our facilitators, our Housing Stability Alliance, and there's a lot of names, so we'll pause there. Okay. Our Board of Trustees, and of course, our backbone team.
I love that our first timers are lighting up the chat, letting us know that this is their first APC. So welcome, welcome. So for this process, each of you have been assigned a virtual table captain for today's meeting. They're here to answer questions and to guide you through today's process. We encourage you to fully participate in the upcoming discussions.
Let's review APC's role and cultural values. First, our role. The APC is the only place that the entire network gathers for perspective seeking and feedback gathering. Second, our cultural values. Yes, and. We promote a culture of improvisational affirmation following the yes and principle of improv comedy. In your APC role, try to express what would make your reaction to an idea more positive. Try not to say no, but rather yes and. The second cultural value, experimentation. We have plenty of environments where it's dangerous to expose a proposal until it's fully developed. The APC is not such an environment. Everything we do is somewhat experimental, and admission of failure or setbacks is an asset. This is a context for got it, not gotcha. Third, accountability. Accountability simply means groups must give the APC an account of their plans, which we affirm. 4, decision rules. We use low-pressure decision-making methods to reinforce the values and culture we seek. And last but not least, listening. Listening is essential. We encourage all of you to listen well to one another during this meeting and beyond in work groups and one-on-one conversations.
Thank you, Stacy. So let's take some time to review what was accomplished the last time we were together at our June APC meeting. We heard from the Black Impact Collaborative about their work in the community, including their 7 impact areas. The Michigan League for Public Policy presented data and policy recommendations on revenue, housing, paid leave, childcare, and healthcare. The Housing Stability Alliance shared their work on a common agenda and roadmap to address housing instability in Kent County. We heard from the prenatal to 3rd grade work group about the early childhood ecosystem in Kent County and how that work is tied to KConnect. And lastly, the APC provided feedback on how the work that was presented by the PN3 work group will benefit systems in our community.
Thank you, Brandy. Our agenda for today's meeting includes receiving an update on the Doulas of Color strategy from the prenatal to 3rd grade work group, learning more about how the Housing Stability Alliance is working toward developing a new backbone organization to operationalize the common agenda and roadmap that was released in September. Hear updates from 4 of our lead convening partners and provide feedback on the upcoming Kent ISD superintendent search. You can find all of today's meeting information, including the slides, pre-reads, and forms at the link listed on the screen. It is also in the chat box. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate my dear friends and longtime APC members, Dr. Brandy Lovelady Mitchell and Dr. Daniel Williams, for being elected to serve on the Grand Rapids Community College Board of Trustees. Congratulations to you both for winning this election and your ongoing service to community. Join me in congratulating them and showing them some love in the chat. And I'm gonna clap wildly because I'm so excited for you. Congratulations.
So sweet. Thank you. I know that it has, I think I can speak for Daniel, but he's coming next. But just the support from the community is awesome and great to serve in that capacity. So thank you. In advance of today's meeting, you should have received the Housing Stability Alliance Common Agenda and roadmap, as well as Kent ISD's by the numbers. You can also find them in the link that is in the chat. I think that's what that's supposed to say. I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Daniel Williams, CEO of WMCAT. Thank you again.
Good morning, everybody. I am excited to be here. Thank you for the well wishes. And yes, I will echo what Brandy said. The best part of this community and feeling so much love and support and being able to move that work forward is really exciting for both of us. So wanted to just do a quick welcome here this morning and talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're going. And really wanted to start with just this idea that crisis can help define a community. And since mid-March, our community has faced incredible challenges, some that we could have imagined, some that we never could have imagined. COVID-19 has made more visible than equities that have been prevalent for decades. And there's just no doubt that the year 2020 is challenging, but it's even more so challenging for our Black and Brown communities throughout the country and here in Kent County. At WMCAT, as many of you know, we engage teens and adults. We've seen significant effects these last 6 months of social isolation, economic fragility, disrupted education, stress of just balancing school and work and family. And in the spring, we worked really hard with funding and resource partners to respond to immediate financial needs. We made those quick pivots to online engagement and learning, doing regular check-ins with all of our students and families. And now that our community is facing this current and potentially even more dangerous wave of coronavirus, we will continue to be committed to being a place where teens and adults can continue to build community virtually, find support and progress in their creative and career journeys. But during this period of uncertainty, there's also been some things to be comforted by and encouraged by. The compassion and outpouring of generosity from our community, individuals, organizations, community groups, businesses. They've all stepped up to do things like provide PPE for our frontline workers, fund organizations that support Black and Brown communities, the support for small businesses that have struggled to stay open. We've seen protests over the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and countless others. And some of that, I mean, that's led to some practice and policy, if not change, at least conversations that are very important to be having. Voter turnout is some of the highest we've ever seen. And there's this diverse coalition of advocates that are coming together and working for systemic change. And here's one thing that has been clear over the last 9 months, and that's that systems conveners like KConnect, as well as the partners that you're going to hear from today, that they are just absolutely essential to our community. And while rapid emergency response is important and it's necessary and it's understandable, these issues are not emergent. And many of you have heard me say this before. In fact, they're ever present. And we can't lose sight of the very real systemic structures that have led and continue to lead to the disparate outcomes that we see. the demand and need for data analysis and process management, facilitation, a laser focus on equity cannot be underestimated. And so with the drastic disparities impacting Black and Brown communities, it's more important than ever that we have organizations working towards engaging community partners to improve outcomes and close the disparity gap. KConnect was built for this. It was built to uncover and address those racial disparities. I was able to see that firsthand, serving as co-chair of 4th through 12th grade work group for almost 5 years. They've continued to develop strategies that work towards improving outcomes for children and families. The recent facilitation and convening work to address housing insecurity has resulted in a comprehensive community plan aimed at moving families who have no housing towards being able to choose housing that's best for their families. That forward movement has been especially exciting for WMCAT as we work to support families through our programming. We know that there are a whole host of systems level inequities that they are facing outside of our walls. And through our social enterprise public agency at WMCAT, we are engaging in work to support more equitable systems, not only for our students, but for all residents. And we're thankful to have consulted with KConnect in the beginning stages of this community plan, helping those who were convened set vision, common language, and goals. Additionally, the Day One Doula Collective, launched as a strategy from the prenatal to 3rd grade work group to address inequitable birth outcomes. They hired their first staff member. They're launching a first cohort of doulas of color in early 2021. And you're going to hear more about that today. And we're really excited to kind of continue to hear about all this important work that's happening. KConnect is looking beyond stability and rethinking how we grow from here. They will continue to provide thought leadership that will positively impact the systems working to improve outcomes for children and family in our community. And while transitions and challenges will always arise, we know that they will embrace them as new opportunities to build towards a better future. I hope that you and your loved ones remain safe, that you continue to wear your masks and practice social distancing and do all the things that are going to keep you and your family and each other safe as possible. I'm now going to pass it over to Andrew Brower, KConnect's Board of Trustees co-chair, for him to introduce the organization's new president.
Awesome, right on, Daniel. Really appreciate it. Congratulations again to you and Brandy, and really appreciate your role and your leadership in this work for both of you. So yeah, good morning, everyone. On behalf of the KConnect Board of Trustees, just want to welcome you to this meeting and really appreciate your attendance and the work you have done and the work that you're going to continue to do. So yeah, here's the news. Here's the update. So earlier this summer, as you know, with Pam's departure, we found ourselves in the position of searching for a new president. And just want to pause for a second and just say that in that interim period, really want to thank Mark Woltman for his leadership and for stepping into that. That was not easy, a couple of day jobs. And as you guys know, during 2020 and during this season, nothing has been convenient. So he did a really good job of just holding it down for us. So we did all the things that you're supposed to do, right? We went out, we interviewed some search firms, we chose a search firm. We required that search firm that they were going to give us a diverse slate of candidates, both across, really across race, ethnicity, and gender, to the point that bills weren't going to be paid if that didn't happen. And we were going to go back and keep trying again, just to make sure that we were honoring those values and what we care about for this community, as well as in the leadership of this organization. So it was a national search, and we did actually have some interest from some folks. We had interest in some folks that actually write books on collective impact, and folks that have actually been in similar roles. However, we narrowed it down to a really strong final slate, and I don't feel bad. I told Salvador how strong this slate was. We actually found ourselves, our search committee, and the opportunity to present to the board a real challenge, because it was so good. And that frankly was something that we were really excited about. That really was something that we were hoping to get. And it was also a really strong slate of diverse candidates across race, ethnicity, and gender. But what we did is we ended up proposing Salvador Lopez as our new president. He accepted. And I think if you guys read the news, you saw that we put out there, Salvador was most recently, he was the Associate Director of Diversity Recruitment for Grand Valley State University. And then before that, he was actually the Director of Language Services at the Hispanic Center of Western Michigan. And for those of you also in the know that may have interacted with him, he's a resident of the Garfield Park neighborhood and is actively engaged in a lot of work with them around justice, around housing, around education, and all the rest. So we're really excited about that. I'm going to introduce him in a second, but really to say that having Salvador come in at this time is really exciting and really perfect. Daniel was talking a little bit about this, and I'm not going to get political here, but I'm also not going to be naive though and say that racism was on the ballot this season, and racism has certainly been on the ballot in previous seasons and in previous elections, but it hasn't necessarily been a named platform like this as it has for several decades at least. There is absolutely no doubt that we are, as a country, as a community even, and people are talking about it as a moral and ethical crisis. It's absolutely, there's conflict out there. And I think our challenge right now is that conflict can either maintain the status quo, or we can start to do things that really start to disrupt that status quo, right? And really dig into that conflict, be disruptive, and be an organization that leads through the data where we know what's going on and we can illuminate what's going on, but we can also get into how we start to solve that. How we think about distributing power, how we actually think about and know about the experiences of what those disparities state. So as we were looking for a new president, that was really top of mind for us, right? Is someone who has experience, someone who has leadership, someone who has passion, someone who has integrity in what we need, someone who has love, someone who has intelligence, and someone who has intensity as well. Because to be honest with you, it is absolutely time. Everyone says you can't take this stuff personally. It is absolutely time that we need to start taking this personally. And I believe Salvador Lopez is going to be an amazing leader for us in what we need right now in this moment and going forward. So welcome, Sal, and all you.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Hopefully my sound is okay here. Buenos dias, right? Good morning, and welcome to the November APC. For those of you who have not met me yet, once again, my name is Salvador Lopez. I'm excited to be the new KConnect president. I started back in September, so I have a fresh 6 weeks into the role. And it's been exciting to meet network partners, learning about the work that has been done, and imagining the future of KConnect. I'm just super excited. I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but I am going to tell you a little bit about me, right? Something that I typically am not a big fan of doing, but I really do think it's important that people get to know me a bit so that they know my why I'm here, how I got here. But then my why I think is important in terms of doing this work. I'm also going to maybe give a glimpse into the future of what I'm hoping to see. But before I say all of that, I first want to say thank you to a couple of people. One is Mark Waltman. Mark's going to hate me for this, but I really want to take a couple of minutes to really say thank you to Mark, who was the interim president for KConnect, and sometime in May all the way to the end of September, and really has been just a wonderful asset in terms of not historical perspectives and making sure that I make a smooth transition into my new role. And so I've been just very grateful for the board of trustees, to Andrew, for everyone for selecting me. But Mark's really been, he's really stepped up in making sure that KConnect wasn't just the organization that kind of just kept working. He demonstrates passion. And in fact, I love seeing Mark because he gets heated about of some of the disparities that we see in the community. And I love it because I get heated. And so the fact that we have a data expert, but more than a data expert in Mark, who really values the importance of storytelling and the importance of making sure that we're moving the needle. That gets me excited. So the fact that Mark's on the team, I just want to say thank you, Mark. And then the work that he's been doing, it's been amazing. So I am very excited to have him on the team. And I just can't imagine being on a team without someone like him. In addition to that, Katie Hops is our communication expert. As you know, she's been the behind the scenes person in many ways. And given that I have a background in communications from my master's degree, I really appreciate her work. I really appreciate what she does behind the scenes, everything from the scripting to making sure people are on task to just making sure that KConnect is able to tell its story, to make sure that KConnect is not only relevant, but leading behind the scenes in a lot of ways. So just very appreciative of both Mark and Katie. Mark and Katie work kind of as a two-person team in some ways when really a lot of work needed to be done. So I can't stress that enough. So first of all, I just wanted to say that my team is awesome, and I look forward to building on our team going forward. Now, one of the things I do like to do, and I have a few more minutes here, I think 6 or 7 minutes. One of the things I like to do is I always open it up to the room. So if you have a question, I'll try to keep tabs on the side, and if I have a little bit of time near the end, I certainly will do my best to answer them. But at this point in time, I'm going to transition into telling you a little bit about myself. So to give you a little bit of a background, you really can't get to know my why without getting to know how I got here. And part of what makes me who I am and what fires me up on a regular basis, it has to do where I come from. And I was born in Salinas, California. My parents are Mexican immigrants. My mom at one point was undocumented. They were farm workers. I grew up in low-income housing for almost 15 years of my life in California, moving from place to place, transitioning from one to the other. Working with my uncle worked with Cesar Chavez back in California, was one of his best friends, grew up with Cesar Chavez. A unique story that I don't often tell. But so a lot of my organizing background, my organizing energy comes from my family to my core. But I also tend to be quiet and learn about humility and things like that. So it's a balance of sorts. But just to tell you a little bit about myself now, I have two wonderful young girls. They're 5-year-old twin. They would say 5.5. I should correct myself. Twin girls. And I live in Garfield Park. I live in a specific community that has lead in its water, specific, very diverse community that faces some very specific challenges. So I am part of the community that we often look to serve. So everything from my background to where I am now really is part of my story, which I'll get to in just a minute. First, professional background, worked in healthcare for almost 8 years, medical interpreter for some time, became the director of language services at the Hispanic Center, worked in GBSU and inclusion and equity work, specifically in recruitment and retention of underrepresented students, and helped build a model that exists at GBSU to help specifically Latinx and African-American Black students. And that model is now being used to help Native and Asian students. And so I'm very proud of that. I did a lot of my work behind the scenes. That's kind of typically how I've operated over the course of my life. And so to be in the spotlight is different. I don't shy away from it, but it certainly is a little bit different at times. And so I'm just excited for that. I did a lot of work in Flint, a lot of work in Detroit. I oversaw Chicago during my time at GBSU. And all to say that all of that has brought me here. But one of the things I would really want to touch on, and it's the great work that KConnect is doing, and you'll hear a lot about it today, but the continuum between the cradle to career component, the timeline that sort of speak from when children are born all the way to getting to a career is very important to me. The reason that it's very important to me is because my own timeline it really intersects with the continuum that we are seeking to serve. So for example, when I was born from an underrepresented community, historically marginalized, 80% Mexican people where I grew up in Salinas, California, all the way to when my parents moved to Grand Rapids when I was 15, my system or my continuum was interrupted by the fact that my parents were able to purchase a home in Grand Rapids, right? In Grand Rapids near Northview High School, where I went to school. All of a sudden, by being in Northview High School, it hit me. Not all school districts are created equal. Not all opportunities are created equal. Not all networks are created equal. Somebody inviting you to their home is not equal to somebody inviting you to their home in Salinas, California. So when I was invited into people's homes in Grand Rapids, I met Dr. Williams, who was the vice president of radiology, who was the father of one of my close friends. And he introduced me to working at St. Mary's Hospital, now Mercy Health. And then that was, again, another disruption in my time, right? I often say that exposure can change a life. Exposure can change a life because depending on your environment, depending on the network that you're around, that really triggers other domino effects that help you be successful. Dr. Williams and 11 other radiologists essentially helped raise me in the professional field and guided me to get to college. I was able to go to GRCC. So shout out to Dr. Brandy Lovelady Mitchell and Dr. Daniel Williams for their recent success there. But I'm a product of GRCC, transferred to GVSU where I got both my degrees, and then was able to do some really good work. But a lot of the inclusion and equity side of things, I did not want to do. It comes with the territory, it comes with my identity. It's not something that I can separate myself from. And so in terms of my story and how I got here, it has to do with disruptors, it has to do with allies, it has to do with underrepresented communities coming together. And so as I look into what KConnect does, and as I look at the collective impact approach of the work of what we do now at KConnect, it's really a systems work that requires that many individuals, programs, and organizations work together for the common good, right? Everything from grassroots to education to business to faith, nonprofits, government, philanthropy, all of that has to work together. It's when we're talking about systems of oppression and white supremacy, we cannot disrupt that with simply one organization, with simply one mindset, with one group of people. It's got to be a collective. We can't do this alone. And that's what I love about KConnect, that I have the opportunity to really disrupt systems for children in Kent County, along with a huge group of people, huge network. People often ask me, well, how big my team is now that I'm in a new organization. And I say, it's huge. We have a huge team, amazing board of trustees, but we also have partners and that you hear about today, and you have work groups and just all these amazing people that just show up. Mark brought this up a few weeks ago, and he said, people just keep showing up to KConnect meetings, regardless of how difficult the conversations are. That's because people understand the collective impact work, the systems model that we have, and how important that is. So moving forward a little bit, in terms of what we can do, and people often are asking me what the vision is, what is it that you want to do, Sal? Well, I've been here for 6 weeks, so I certainly can't give you the full scope just yet. But what I have seen and noticed is that regardless of what we end up doing, my mentality in terms of future focus, in terms of the big picture, is going to be the people first mentality. Organize, making sure that people are coming together, herding cats, making sure that everybody's in the same room. And then challenging systems together, because there's no other way to do that. We have to create access by moving beyond the conversation. I think we're doing some of that. You're going to hear about doulas of color. You're going to hear about housing, and you're going to hear about some of very important work that's happening. It's a we movement. We are part of that, right? We are bringing people together for that. And so I'm really excited for those kind of conversations to take place, and also moving those conversations forward into action items that we really could measure. Now, in terms of what that looks like, I like to collect small wins. So when we look at what the small wins can do for us, it helps keep us accountable, but it also helps us kind of move forward. So often systems work and collective impact can be really difficult to explain. Sometimes people say, well, what the heck does KConnect do, right? So I think we're going to do a better job of telling that story. We're going to do a better job of making sure that we are collecting those small wins. And today is a perfect example when folks are coming up and talking about the great work that they are doing along with us. And so change is constant. We're going through COVID-19. Daniel mentioned some very specific examples about how that's affecting communities of color. We have to use our influence and humility over power and authority. And I think KConnect has the ability to do that. We have the ability to do that through our team. Now, in terms of living in 2020 and living with some of the challenges that we have, we can't ignore the fact that white supremacy is certainly something of a challenge, something that's going to slow us down. There's always going to be folks that try to slow down the work. We have to acknowledge that these things exist. We have to acknowledge that police relations is an issue. We have to acknowledge that there is inequities. All of this is part of the continuum. All of this is part of the cradle to career component. So acknowledging that they exist, bringing people together, and executing and have action items ready to go to make sure that we're doing everything we can at KConnect to move the needle forward is going to be something that I'm really excited for. Certainly, we're looking at capacity building and growing and building our team. My vision is, and I'll flat out say it, my vision is that in the next 12 months to 24 months, the latest, KConnect sits at tables and is known to be an organization that's led for and by predominantly people of color. And that means our network, that means our reach, that means our organizational structure. I'm very excited for that because I think KConnect is already doing some very important work. We have been doing some very important work. And so I think it's just a matter of really calling that out, really making sure that we show up. And I can't separate myself from my identities, and my team won't be able to either. And I kind of mentioned that in Katie and Mark and the fire that they have. We can't. We have to move forward, and we have to make sure that we acknowledge that this exists. And KConnect is a part of the we moving forward that makes all of these systems work. So with that being said, I've already talked a little bit too long, so I don't want to talk longer than that. Next, I do want to introduce our next speaker. So with that being said, I don't see any questions out there, but feel free to send them my way on the private message throughout. I'm happy to answer any that you may have. I'm excited for you to hear an update now from Kiara Baskin, Program Manager for Day One Doula Collective, and Tiffany Townsend from De La Flor Midwifery, as they update us on the birth equity strategy that was developed by the prenatal to third grade work group. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Sal. In 2018, KConnect's prenatal to third grade work group developed a two-part strategy that positively impacts both prenatal and career areas of KConnect's continuum. The first strategy was to connect expectant women of color in Kent County with doula services, specifically prioritizing women who may be at risk of having a low birth weight baby. The second was to equip women of color in Kent County with the skills and certifications needed to achieve a career as a doula that allows them to earn a sustaining wage. The goal is to increase the likelihood of women of color to have a baby that is over 5.5 pounds. The research shows us that receiving doula services is directly related to improved birth outcomes, improving these outcomes overall and closing the disparity gap that helps put children on the path to economic prosperity from day one.
Since 2018, the Prenatal to Third Grade Work Group and Birth Equity Align and Design team have been working to develop the strategy and launch the pilot. Earlier this year, Day One Doula Collective hired me as its first program manager. The pilot is currently being incubated at Baxter Community Center and launches its first cohort early next year. The Day One Doula Collective is a system-level response to the inequities around low birth weight and the need to diversify the healthcare system. Low birth weight is considered an indicator of success under their kindergarten readiness success measure on KConnect's work plan. Looking at local data in 2018, Black babies were more than twice as likely to be born at a low birth weight compared to white babies. So in other words, 1 in 7 African-American babies were born at a low birth weight. If low birth weight is directly related to kindergarten readiness, then we know that it's imperative for these babies to start their life healthy. The pilot program also addresses the disparity around thriving family income. In 2018, a Black family made nearly $47,000 less than a white family. By training women of color to become doulas and earn a sustainable living wage, we can close the disparity gap and create a more equitable economy in Kent County. This month, Day One Doula Collective is bringing a training session to train the trainers in order to prepare for the upcoming cohort. This training is in partnership with Health Connect One, which is a national leader in advancing equitable, community-based, peer-to-peer support for pregnancy, birth, breastfeeding, and early parenting. So right now, we have nearly 100 women of color who have expressed interest in becoming a doula with this program.
The Day One Doula Collective has also partnered with the Center for the Study of Social Policy to integrate developmental understanding and legal collaboration for everyone. This partnership will provide additional training for the doulas on topics related to social determinants of health, health equity, home visiting safety, and motivational interviewing. Through collaborations like these and other local, state, and national partnerships, the Day One Doula Collective is bringing diversity to healthcare community while improving outcomes for babies of color. The Day One Doula Collective is funded separately from KConnect. Heart of West Michigan United Way acts as the fiduciary for the pilot. The Day One Doula Collective is funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Steelcase Foundation, Center for the Study of Social Policy, and the Michigan Health Endowment Fund. To stay up to date, please follow the Day One Doula Collective on social media. We'll provide the link in the chat box. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mandy Boulder, Rachel Scott, and Bo Torres, who will be discussing the work that KConnect Network has been doing related to housing stability.
I'm having technical difficulties. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to just say I'm so thankful to be here. I'm thankful to speak out about the Housing Stability Alliance and kind of our progress that we've made. I'm thankful to be here on behalf of the county. And I also just want to get a quick plug in. I do work at Spectrum, and I want everyone to know that things are really moving in the wrong direction with COVID, and I want you all to be safe and really practice all of those health guidelines and social distancing and masking that is so important for our community to be safe, but especially for communities of color who are impacted at what seems to be a greater percentage. So I just want to get that out there. But back to the script. We've concluded our first portion of the Housing Stability Alliance. It was a 2-year engagement process. It started, as you know, when community leaders came to kind of elevate the problem of family homelessness in the Black and Brown communities. They were seeing that the system was not geared toward their needs, and it wasn't addressing the needs. KConnect was asked to kind of fill up the space. It was a tough challenge. There's a lot of different housing groups in this community, which is good in one way. We have a lot of awesome resources. In another way, you have a little bit of dysfunction working together. You had some turf wars. We needed to bring everybody together to provide some neutral facilitation, some transparency, but to kind of get everyone rowing in the same direction. KConnect agreed to step up as that backbone player, and they brought everybody together. They illuminated these disparities. They brought voices of lived experience to the table, which was very important. And they really needed to bring all of us together so that we could identify the problem, but really bring a heightened awareness to the community as a whole. Philanthropy, government, the general public. Our goal was to create this plan to address these racial disparities, but then now we're in the process of communicating that plan and moving forward. And I'll turn it over to Rachel.
I'm sorry, I need to present. Go away.
Michelle, sorry. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm talking to the child. Hi, everyone. My name is Rochelle Scott, and I am really excited to be here and to help share some of the work we've been doing. So in the first 12 months of this work, while teams worked toward creating this community plan, major findings were identified. They included the alarming disparities related to housing stability, especially in regard to the disproportionate rates of homelessness for African Americans, the exponential rise in housing prices over recent years, the understanding that the current system in Kent County is built upon a history of systemic racism and lack of input from those with lived experience. And that lack of a common language to describe the many elements of the community's housing system. The initiative was originally slated to end in December 2019, but the need for a more comprehensive community plan that focused on building the structure to implement equitable systems change became increasingly apparent, resulting in a 6-month extension. The movement reorganized as the Housing Stability Alliance and brought on a team of co-chairs to lead the work. The Housing Stability Alliance aims to do something unprecedented, never been done before, which is ensure housing stability for all Kent County residents, especially for families of color. The unfortunate reality in Kent County is that due to generations of racism and injustice, coupled with increasing housing prices and low wages, its Black and brown residents are disproportionately homeless, living in motels, doubled up in overcrowded apartments, frequently moving from home to home and living in unsafe conditions. And COVID, as you can imagine, has only further exacerbated this situation. The Alliance aims to disrupt the current reality for families who face housing instability and homelessness by rewiring systems, establishing new relationships, and dismantling policies that lead to these adverse outcomes. Through a collective impact model, the Alliance seeks to bridge the gaps in the current local housing system so that going forward, it exists to serve the full continuum of Kent County residents, from those who have no home to those who are housed by choice. Back to you, Mandy.
Yep. So I just can't stress enough to how what the incredible work of KConnect did. It was almost miraculous in the sense of I didn't even fully understand how complex the housing situation in Kent County really is. So pulling this all together, it did take time, and I have heard some feedback from several people in the community that when are you going to get this done, and keeping us on target. But it's important to get it done, and we are moving forward, but it was also important to get it right. And so I really want to again commend KConnect for all their work. And just we did some really solid work. We found data, we had our findings based on all of this, our vision and mission. The Alliance developed a roadmap of strategies and actions that will operationalize the next phase of the work for housing stability in Kent County. The roadmap includes plans of equity and community engagement.
Good morning, Bob.
A shared measurement system, which is going to be very key. High-level leverage activities, continuous communication, and a new backbone entity. The action team that was focused on the backbone entity requested additional time past the 6-month extension to determine which, if any, organization would be fully equipped to do all of this work. The backbone work will be very key to this in moving forward. The team proposed a short-term solution to develop a steering committee composed of primarily people of color and those with lived experience. The steering committee also hired a startup consultant to help propel the work forward during this interim period. This work went before the APC in June, as you'll remember, and was affirmed to move forward as I've described it. With that support, the common agenda and roadmap was released in August. Move it back to Rochelle.
Thanks, Mandy. So the steering committee immediately got to work identifying, excuse me, what organization, if any, could serve as the Alliance's backbone. And what I mean by organizations, what local organization, if any, could serve as the Alliance's backbone. So over the first few months, the committee developed a process by which interested organizations could submit applications to be the backbone. In total, 9 organizations applied. 3 were selected for final interviews. Those 3 were the Urban League of West Michigan, the Urban Core Collective, and West Michigan Partnership for Children. After internal conversations, Urban Core Collective, as a member-based organization, chose to walk alongside and support the Urban League. And so those 2 organizations delivered a unified presentation to the steering committee and Alliance. Over to you, Bo.
Thank you, Rochelle. Buenos dias, everyone. So both the Urban League and the West Michigan Partnership for Children were asked to present on how they would operationalize the common agenda and roadmap. They also answered 30 minutes of structured interview questions and were allowed 10 minutes to ask questions of the steering committee. The Urban League of West Michigan presented a strong history of equity, inclusion, community trust, and experience in housing stability. West Michigan Partnership for Children presented strong capacity for data, project management, and systems level convening. Both the steering committee and the Housing Stability Alliance gave quantitative and qualitative feedback during and after the presentations. This feedback was synthesized and presented to the steering committee in order to give data on the presentations. This feedback was synthesized, presented in the steering committee in order to inform the final decisions on who would be serving as the backbone organization for the Housing Stability Alliance. Back to you, Rochelle.
Thank you. So the steering committee spent an inordinate amount of time, considerable amount of time, reflecting on the breadth and the depth of this work and how a backbone organization would meet the specific needs of the community. So after reviewing the data, reflecting on the presentations and multiple conversations, the steering committee has decided to form a new backbone organization to lead this work. And this decision, I have to stress, did not come easily because, as you can imagine, each of the two organizations that presented had a considerable amount of strengths. So again, I'd like you guys to understand that it did not come easy to the committee to ultimately decide to form a new backbone organization to lead this work, but we do believe it is the right decision. The new backbone will support a system-wide response to address housing inequities across the entire housing spectrum and will intentionally include people of color as the voice in leadership. The details of this new venture are being developed and will be announced to the community once it is completed. The common agenda and roadmap will also be updated, of course, to reflect this development. Go ahead, Bo.
Thank you. So I want to reiterate that this work is long-term. It needs thoughtful deliberation from all of us, processes put in place and planning. It needs an organization that is built specifically for addressing the disparate outcomes we see in our systems today. By working together, we can create something extraordinary in order to really walk alongside our community members.
Thank you to the Housing Stability Alliance for all the work that you've done over the past 2 years to ensure equitable access to safe and stable housing for all residents of Kent County. The release of the common agenda and roadmap for housing security, along with the creation of a new backbone organization, are significant steps in creating a responsive system designed to serve the needs of everyone in the community, but especially Black and Brown children and families. I'd like to transition to the next portion of our time together, which is hearing from some of KConnect's leading convening partners on the work they're doing in community. We'll be starting with Dr. Shayla Young and Dr. Tony Baker from To College Through College. TCTC is a leading convening partner for our high school to career portion of KConnect's continuum.
All right, good morning. It's so fantastic to, first of all, follow our brand new community college trustees. And for those of you that know these two individuals, it's the perfect need filled for higher education. And I also really want to congratulate the board for their trust and vision to bring on Salvador. I think that I'm fortunate to know both Salvador and this community. And I think that if you know both Salvador and the community, then you know that this was the right decision to make. So I'm really looking forward to working with KConnect under his leadership. And just real quick, Shayla, myself, and Shannon Harris, and I also want to just give a shout out to Lynn Heemstra, who's just recently announced her retirement coming up in a couple months. And if you've run into any of us and the subject of To College Through College has come up, we have shifted into, as Sal said, the disruptor mode, and very adamant and passionate about this work. We can move on to the next slide, please. One more. And one more. So our vision, we can read through this vision, but really our goal is to help GRPS students to own their future by removing barriers to their continued education and training. the data we're going to look at today, some of you are familiar with it because it's a general understanding of what has happened with GRPS students once they've left high school and gone on to post-secondary opportunities. And we're going to also focus on the impact of COVID and how this has even increased more barriers. We talk about to college through college, but we're really interested in anything that helps students to achieve their aspirations in any kind of post-secondary training. And that would include gap year programs such as those that are happening at WMCAT. We need to help students own their future. So if we can move on. This is a way that we see ourselves. And so to college through college in this wheel is the hub. And if you can tell, it's kind of imposing itself on these other parts of the wheel. And I think that that's really what we've done. Our students are in our community, they're of our community, and the community is who benefits from and is consequenced by the student's success or failure. And so we really see ourselves, and I think that people that know us see ourselves as imposing ourselves into these other institutions, that we are a bridge or a cornerstone, and we feel that the community was the missing link to the success of our students as they go off to higher education. And I think that the data that we'll look at in a moment will illustrate that. This, for those of you that have seen us give presentations before, this is just a really nice visual that illustrates our work. The green is our students that enter college after high school. The yellow are students that have entered college and then have dropped out. So our goal is to create more green. Purple is the color of graduation, and to get rid of the yellow. And if you could look more closely at this data, the yellow for the first 2 years has gone down from this data. And unfortunately with higher ed data, it's always 4 to 6 years old. But we do see ourselves impacting that. But this is a really resistant data to change. So a lot of variables go into whether or not our students are getting into school, succeeding once they get there. But I do want to point out, if you look at the one on the left, you will see, and this is really important, that a role in the community. If anytime you see green, that means students are entering higher education. And even on that left chart, if you go out 5, 6, 7 years, you'll see there's a slight bit of green. So that means that students who are graduating, that graduated in 2012, are still entering college for the first time. And there needs to be a route that helps those students get there and then help them to succeed once they've gotten there. Moving on. We wanted to illustrate what's happened. So there's the usual concerns with success for higher education. And then there's COVID, and this is the year of COVID, and this is national data. And if you look at the chart on your left is 4-year institutions, and the chart on the right are 2-year institutions. And you'll see, especially the one on the right with 2-year institutions, the enrollment declines are pretty dramatic beginning fall of 2020. This is important for a couple of reasons. One is, obviously, our kids are not going into school at the same rates they used to. The other thing that's happening is that as our students need more, our universities probably have less resources to help those students. So if they're going to succeed, they need us to help them. But I want to point out if you look at the chart on the bottom for Hispanic enrollment, Latino students over the last 10 years, even in Michigan where declining enrollment was happening at most universities, Latino enrollment was going up. And if you'll see, fall of 2019, you do see slight increases from the previous year. But if you look at fall 20, you see dramatic decreases happening. And so COVID has reversed a very positive trend. And it's our work as a community to make sure that these students, especially African-American Latino students who are more harmed by the consequences of COVID, that we target resources to seeing that these students get back into school and to succeed once they get there.
May I ask a question, or is that allowed?
I'll answer it, or I'll try to answer it.
If you go to the previous slide, what was the difference between persisted and graduated, please?
Persistent is orange.
Yeah.
So if you were green the year before and you're orange this year, that means that you were in school and you stayed in school. The orange can get smaller because you either drop out or you graduate.
Okay, thank you.
And that's from the National Student Clearinghouse data, which is what all universities and public school systems use to chart their success. Move forward a couple slides. This I just want to point, again, this is national data, but this is very much reflected by what we see. And these are basic needs. This is the community. So if you look at food insecurity, at two-year institutions, 44% of students are hungry. 38% of students at four-year institutions are hungry. We have run into students who have gotten in trouble with law enforcement because they were hungry. And so if you think universities should help with that, they probably should. But if they're not able to do that before, they're not going to be able to do it. So if we're sending hungry kids off to college, we need to do, it's our community responsibility to see that they're not hungry. And if you see the chart on the right, 15% of four-year institution students are homeless. And we definitely know, and Shayla has experiences of working with students who are homeless. So moving on to the next slide. Our students, our high school students need additional supports to transition to college. We know this. The basic needs of students are an acute barrier to post-secondary access and success. And just moving to the bottom, state higher ed appropriations, as we all know, are not going up. So that means that, again, if universities ought to be able to do more, they're probably less likely to have the resources to do more, and the community needs to step up. And that's really what Two College Through College has been about for all this time. And just the next two slides give you a little bit more background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Shayla. This just shows what's happening in the state of Michigan. The chart on the left, our enrollment in the fall of 2019. And the chart on the right is enrollment for fall 20. And you'll see that all of the universities are experiencing declines in student enrollment. And some universities are experiencing a lot more. What that means is our children who would have been going off to college didn't go off to college. So they will either need supports to get back into school, or we need to figure out something else for these young people to be doing that's positive. And the last chart, the last one I'll talk about before Shayla takes over, is this is just a list of where our students go to school. So GRCC by far is number one. That certainly is true with the Promise Zone, but our students also go to Grand Valley, Michigan State, Western, University of Michigan, and I'll stop with Ferris State, but they do go a variety of places. So Shayla, can you take over and tell some more stories?
Yes, Tony, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of serving as the coordinator for the programmatic side of this work, which also aligns at a systems level so that we can provide coordinated and programmatic services in the T2C studio. So we offer navigational, financial, and supportive services to students going to and through college. And our target that was established with TCTC early on was that we wanted to connect with those first generation students of color from Grand Rapids Public Schools. At the time that TCTC was being conceived, the data showed that about 60% of GRPS graduates were going off to college the fall after graduating high school. And then over the course of 6 years, 18% of those students were graduating with a 2 or 4 year degree. And the goal became to increase that 18% to 40% for those students. And it has risen by 4 percentage points. We reported that at our last summit, so that is something to celebrate, and also speaks to the various efforts that our community has that's supporting our students to and through college. So we are pretty much on target with who we're serving in the T2C studio. And what's beautiful about this is that this is inclusive of COVID data too. So we're able to still connect with our target population during COVID. We connect with students in various ways, including outreach and events in the communities and in the school setting, through our text messaging services, and also through virtual and in-person visits. And the next slide will highlight our summer, some of our summer stats here and how we shifted in a practical way during COVID-19. So on March 16th, our world just blew up, right? And we were pushed into a virtual space because of COVID-19. I often say, and I thank you guys for the congratulations in the chat. I just got my doctorate degree in May. And my motto, guys, was that I had 20/20 vision. But could anyone envision this 2020? No. Okay, so 2020 threw us for a loop, but it pushed us to develop T2C virtual. And we did that not just by ourselves, but also with our partners. So our higher ed partners developed T2C virtual space within their respective organizations. And we were able to connect with students through our website platform, through Facebook, text messages, and then also our social media. And the next slide will show you how exactly our social media engagement went. So we developed, actually students developed a Speak On It series. And this was an opportunity for students, college representatives, high school and college students to just have space to dialogue, to talk, to learn. And they did that on a Facebook platform. And so we had over 2,000 views on these 4 Speak On It's that we did. And this is something that we will continue to embed into our services. And so these are just some of the responses that students had to COVID. One student said, in short, get woke. Another student talked about how Black Lives Matter and the racial pandemic we experienced over the summer really hurt their perception of wanting to go back to college. And so that was just a good space to have with students, and it stayed true to our authentic space that we offer in the T2C studio for students. Also, we were able to engage in some of our data cleanup this summer, and we hired a summer retention specialist. And again, these are our numbers for those that we're serving. We have currently 1,809 students in our database, and that is a combination of high and low touch points that we're having with students and offering those one-on-one services. So I'm gonna actually stop talking and turn it over to the true expert in this room around post-secondary, and that is a student herself. So if we could go to the next slide, please. I would like to introduce Mariah Barrera. She is a first-year student at Columbia University. She graduated from Grand Rapids Public Schools in 2020. She is a first-generation student, and she has utilized T2C Studio services to get to college and also through. So Mariah, are you on the call?
Yes, I'm here. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, I think so. Okay. Good morning. My name is Mariah Barrera, and I am a first-year student at Columbia University, and I graduated from GRPS last year. So I went to City High Middle School. And just to give a little bit of context about like my identity and how it was navigating through the college process, I am Hispanic. I am a first-gen low-income student that faced a lot of adversity throughout high school. specifically related to, being low income and experiencing housing instability. And so something I noticed when it was kind of time for me to start applying to college, there was this big emphasis at my school or this general misconception that everyone had parents who went to college or who had older siblings who could kind of help them through the application process. So of course I had resources from my school, such as my guidance counselor, but there was still this misconception that students had it figured out. And I began to notice when the season came around to start applying how that was negatively impacting students like me. But I remember that I went to an after-school program, WMCAT, West Michigan Center for Arts and Technology, and I remembered that Shayla came multiple times to speak to us about T2C Studio. And this was kind of when I was like in 10th, 9th grade that I remember. But when it came time to apply, I knew that T2C was a resource that I could utilize. So I went there for help. And some of the help that I got practical help on things such as FAFSA, and kind of Shayla was there to answer my questions about financial aid, which can be very confusing when you're navigating it for the first time. But I also got help on things such as scholarships. She connected me with 2 scholarships that I actually received and are helping me get through college at this moment. And she really helped me hone in on my essay writing skills that ultimately helped me get into the school that I'm currently at. And I would say like the most important thing out of that was her teaching me that my story is important. And that's something that I find serving me now as a student, in different classes, navigating this. I feel like that was probably the most important takeaway, is learning to like have confidence in myself and my story and my experiences, and know that whatever education setting I find myself in, that I belong there. So currently now I'm doing my first year from home because of COVID, and that has a lot of challenges within itself. But I think that the most difficult thing to navigate has been trying to have a sense of community at my university, whether that be with the resources there or my peers. It's kind of hard to find that, and that's something that's been very challenging for me. But that's kind of where T2C Studio has come in, because since I'm not physically there and I can't connect with the resources on campus, I know that if I have any questions or need help on any aspect of my first year, that T2C Studio is a resource that's there for me. And I can schedule, virtual appointments if I, need help navigating something. And so that gives me a lot of ease and kind of alleviates a lot of the stress that I think I would otherwise have if I didn't have that community resource that I could access at this time. So I guess in general, I just kind of wanted to say that T2C Studio is a very necessary resource in our community for students like me, especially in a time like this pandemic. It's the kind of consistency that I think a community needs, and especially there's emphasis on students like me. Sometimes it can feel disheartening being in those positions and you see all your peers around you who seem to have families who have those things figured out. But T2C Studio definitely helped me gain a lot of confidence and really helped me be ready for my first year. And I know that there's still going to be a resource for me as I go through these next 3 years. So yeah, thank you.
Wow, Mariah, thank you so much. One, I just want to say, if we are not giving Mariah the Zoom clap hands, I see it in the chat, she got up at 8:40, to be here at 8:45 to share her story. And I promise you guys that I did not write any of her talking points. So I am so just grateful for you, Mariah. Thank you for being here this morning. And we thank you. Your community thanks you for persisting and for continuing on and for reaching the levels and the heights that you're continuing to reach. You're amazing. So thank you, Mariah. And so moving on to the next slide, if you appreciated and enjoyed Mariah's story, we invite you to our summit on December 3rd, where we will highlight more student voice and talk about this in-between space that we occupy between the different sectors to strengthen partnership for student success. So that is going to be December 3rd from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And it is listed on Eventbrite, guys. So we invite you to join us December 3rd. And lastly, if there are any questions or if you have any additional information you'd like to know about the To College Through College initiative, feel free to contact me. My information is on the slide here. And we encourage you to visit our website too. And if you know of any young people who are in need of one-on-one services as it relates to college, they can visit that website to set up an appointment. So thank you guys for having us and for sharing space with us today so we can tell you about our work.
Man, sharing space with you, I'm just honored to have been able to hear Miss Mariah. I could barely sit in my seat because I was so excited about her claiming her voice. And if that is not inspiration for us to take care of the hard work of the collective impact that KConnect is asking us to engage in, I don't know what is. It definitely illuminates that when we have the right conditions for our young scholars, how they can thrive. And just also want to give a shout out to you, Dr. Shayla. We know that you are a GRPS student that had a Gates Millennium Scholarship that just earned her doctorate degree. So come on, if that's not highlighting, if we have the proper conditions, people can maximize their potential and then give back. So I'm excited about what you all have done. So thank you to Miss Mariah, thank you to Dr. Baker, and thank you, Dr. Young, for your dedication to high school and college students. It's definitely instrumental in increasing college enrollment and persistence. So thank you for all that you do. I gotta calm down. Woo! Next, we're going to move on to our other lead convening partners in the high school to career space and hear from Kevin Stotts from Talent 2025.
Good. Well, good morning, and what an amazing and inspiring story by Maria. I'm always amazed at the work of TCTC, and the testimonial of Maria is just terrific to watch. For those of you who don't know much about Talent 2025, I'll give a little bit of background and take a little bit of a different bent in our work that's been going on since the beginning of the year, which has really been sort of something that's been going on for quite a long time, and that's an emphasis on workforce diversity and inclusion. First, if you don't know much about Talent 2025, we're a coalition of 120 plus CEOs from across Western Michigan. We really look at the entire labor shed of the 13 counties in West Michigan, and how do we align that talent system from early childhood through workforce development to the role of employers and their strategies. On the call, I know, is Jaren Kalina, who's project manager for our education work, and I know she works with many of you. Our goal is really to improve the quality of talent across the region. And one of the things that we recognized early on in the work was that we can't be a top 20 region for talent unless our strategies are inclusive of attracting and retaining diverse talent. We just can't get there. And if you look at the disparities in employment, income between people of color and the majority community, it is something that's holding us back in so many different ways. And so our coalition, our CEO Council, really made a commitment years ago, back in 2015, to say, what is our role in that? What should employers do to be a part of the solution? And that was one areas of focus. We have actually 3 priorities right now. One is improving reading proficiency for kids grades K through 3, and we work with all the school districts across the region in partnership when helping with the Reading Now Network. The second is reducing barriers to employment. Certainly pre-COVID, we were at a state of full employment with unemployment below 3%, but we knew that there were still individuals struggling to find employment or sustain employment. We knew that there was disparities in employment by race, gender, and ethnicity, and reducing those has been a focus of ours. It's shifted a bit as we've responded to COVID. We've certainly seen millennials, people of color, and women be the most impacted and disrupted by the economic recession that's followed the recession. There's a lot of work we're doing now to sort of mitigate that and help to connect people to the employment opportunities that exist now and this economy that's restructuring. But for us, we have always focused on It's sort of what can employers do to drive success within their organizations and contribute to a better, richer community. And so what we've always understood is that our CEOs really want action, and they want results, and they want to be able to hold each other accountable. So going back to 2015, we actually worked with Paul Doyle and Inclusive Performance Partners to really look at and study what's happening. What are people of color saying in the workforce? What are employers and HR and diversity inclusion officers saying within their organizations? Where are the disconnects? Because there's a lot of effort going on, but it's certainly not adding up in terms of equity in employment, income, occupations, and people of sort of equal sort of distribution of people across all occupations and industry. And that really set off a couple of really key insights that we've really followed since that report. First is that the CEO, the leader of the organization, really has to be the champion for diversity and inclusion. It can't be kind of handed off to somebody else to drive. It really has to be seen as a priority and a focus of the organization. So the CEO as a champion is really kind of essential. Second is, not surprising for leaders in business, a lot of accountability. So how do you build accountability? How do you do benchmarking? How do you survey? How do you understand your current state, what sort of future state you want to get to, and then having sort of impactful strategies. With a recognition of, oddly in West Michigan, we have a sort of tendency to sort of discount anything that's happening or a success that's happening across maybe the rest of the state or the country. And so we really have sort of looked at what are effective strategies that employers in West Michigan have been implementing, lessons learned in terms of increasing the diversity and inclusion within their workforces. And so those three things, sort of the CEO as a commitment, sort of accountability with some sort of measurement tool, and then effective strategies have been the focus of our work. And so what I think we're going to do now is show you a video. This video was shared at our annual CEO Council meeting a couple of weeks ago as an update to that CEO group, really talking about the 4 areas of our focus now in our work. And until then, we've really been sort of quietly working at this to make sure it works before we roll it out to the rest of the community. I'll talk about that next step after the video concludes.
In order for West Michigan to become a top region for talent, and particularly to attract new talent, we need to be inclusive of all types of people.
Our mission is to change lives through the power of work at Goodwill, and we do that through driving towards the vision that everyone has access to a pathway to meaningful and sustainable work. And that means that we have to remove the barriers to that vision.
I believe in West Michigan, one of the biggest challenges we face is the disparities between communities of color and white communities in income and education levels.
It's simply not a level playing field. And we have decided at Talent 2025 that we need to enter into this space to make the changes that are necessary.
The research on this is clear. Diverse companies outperform their less diverse peers all the time. In 2017, the working group designed and implemented 4 distinct strategies to help West Michigan employers make measurable progress towards diversity and inclusion. The first strategy was the CEO commitment, which committed the CEOs to lead their organizations through active strategies to increase diversity and inclusion. The second strategy is the annual benchmarking survey, which is a confidential survey that employers take.
It allows us to collect baseline data. Just simply going through it allows us to understand where we still have work to do, and so it informs strategic planning, allows us to benchmark against other organizations, and then obviously to measure the progress that we're making in our diversity and inclusion efforts.
It allows Talent 2025 to really see the progress of the community as a whole as we move through this. The third strategy was leadership development events.
The purpose of these leadership development events is to provide top-level leaders and their teams with tools and resources to tackle the challenges of diversity and inclusion in their own workplaces. The tools provided at the leadership development events include frameworks, language, and next steps to support leaders and their teams. The target audience for the leadership development events are top-level leaders in organizations, but we also know that beyond the top-level leaders, it's beneficial to invite other decision makers in the business. So people that are driving decisions and the work back in the office should come to the events as well.
I proposed the CEO Roundtable because I really felt it was important to have accountability as CEOs to the commitments that we've made. It provides a great spot to have frank discussions around some of the challenges that we face, as well as to share strategies and successes. The fourth is Pivot, an online database of specific tools that organizations of any size or any stage in their D&I journey can utilize.
Content was curated by local employers and national resources to provide strategies that are proven to work in West Michigan.
Diversity and inclusion is vital to our success, both in our corporations and in our communities. As business leaders, we have the opportunity to be vastly influential in this space.
I invite all CEOs to join us in this work.
I urge you to join us as champions of our effort.
We owe it to our community in West Michigan to make this an inclusive place for all people of all backgrounds. There's no wrong way to get started. The only thing is to actually get started. Talent 2025 has the resources to help, and I invite you to join us in this work.
So that's an overview of our work and our 4 areas of focus as a CEO council. The work that we have in terms of those 4 categories, I think, is exciting. I mean, the enthusiasm that we have of our CEOs, I think, is sort of shown in the fact that we've got 80 of our CEOs who have signed that CEO commitment, and that CEO commitment requires and measures progress towards increasing diversity of board governance structures, executive managerial teams, frontline workforce, and supplier diversity. So what we've always been focused on is building out sort of accountability and not just a hollow commitment to do these things for the good of the company and the good of the community. And that's, I think, coming through in the level of enthusiasm. One thing I think is important to note in that in our planning work is derived by a group of CEOs, HR leaders, D&I leaders from across a wide range of companies in West Michigan. And what we've really understood is that some companies are nervous to get started because they think that they maybe are starting in the wrong spot or don't know enough. We've always encouraged companies to understand that there's no bad starting point. It's just getting started, and knowing that every company, every organization is on a continuum is essential to sort of making progress. I'm going to ask if I can take have screen sharing rights for just a quick moment. And there you go. One of the things that was noted in the video was the benchmarking survey, and we're just completing this now and getting reports out to our member CEOs. And anything that we do, it requires accountability amongst our membership. And I think this is a great testament to the work we've done of building accountability into this priority of increasing workforce diversity and inclusion. And that was a partnership with Calvin University. I see Neil is on the call right now. What we have really sought to do is build off of a best practice called the Global Diversity and Inclusion Index. Our survey is modeled after that best practice, and one collects demographic information about the employer and the workforce and the management and the diversity of the corporate board, but it also looks at the categories that are in Pivot, the 14 categories we have in Pivot, and the organization can see how they compare in terms of where their score is on each of these different categories and the other companies that score themselves. We even allow for segmentation by industry, so you can see, how do I compare against the companies if I'm a manufacturer, so other manufacturers, or if I'm in healthcare, other healthcare providers. And this is Talent 2025 scorecard. And we've now been doing this survey for 4 years, offering it to companies. It's being utilized more and more and more. And I can tell you, it drives performance improvement. It drives some performance improvement because we're hearing that from our member companies that have been using the survey now for a couple of years. I'm really quite excited about that. Because now what I said before is we wanted to really make sure that this tool and these resources work and drive measurable change and improvement, and those have. And so we've really been inviting more employers across the region, not just our membership, to engage with us. We have a new partnership with the Better Business Bureau to really reach out and connect with very small businesses that really don't have the resources, and helping them figure out how do we walk with those organizations to share these resources so that we can invite more people into the workforce, address issues of disparities in the workforce and income, et cetera. And so we're really quite looking forward to that. So that's a quick summary of our work, and it's good to see all of you this morning.
Thank you so much, Kevin. The system level thinking that Talent 2025 brings to this community is invaluable. So thank you. As you're hearing, lead convening partners are critical system building partners along the prenatal to career continuum. After we hear from the next two lead convening partners, we are going to break out into small groups to discuss the questions on the screen. I also just want to pause for a second and say, earlier, I think I mispronounced our young scholar's name. I want to say and claim her name, Mariah Barrera, because we know that names speak legacy and history and love and lineage. So I want to make sure we do our due diligence to that young scholar and honoring her. So Katie. Okay. So maybe we're not going to questions right now. So what I'll do is say we're moving to the other end of the spectrum. We're going to hear from President Valdez, president of First Steps Kent.
Thank you, Brandy. Good morning, everyone. And I'm delighted to be here to present early childhood, our prenatal to third grade lead convening partner report. And like to say that the brevity of this report should not reflect on the depth and importance of the work. So we can go to the next slide. Thank you. For the last 6 years, there's been incredible collaboration throughout the community and working on early childhood. There have been convenings and discussion and working through use of facilitation to land on the indicators that we would use as measurement for moving the needle in early childhood. And as a community, working together on that means that not only funders, but government and education can work together and try to move that needle for our youngest children and their families. Each year, we've participated in APC presentations and brought you the great work of this work group. We can go to the next slide. Something I'd like to touch on that we're very excited about currently is a collaborative project. We, KConnect and First Steps and many of our partners have discussed that parents and families are dealing with so much during this pandemic, things that they'd never experienced before. So we really set out to create a pathway for listening to parents to understand what they're dealing with. And we brought on Eureka People and her team, and also a parent design team. So these parents led the work. We had 3 parents designing the process. And we've just started to do this work, but we're really excited about it because we're able to really dig in deep with parents using different types of vehicles for that. So the project goals for the parent listening sessions are creating pathways for parent voice to inform decision-making in early childhood systems and funding, to engage over 100 parents, and to prioritize families of color and families eligible for services. We want to ensure broad representation throughout Kent County. We have also done another collaboration with KConnect, and it's a parent messaging campaign called You Got This. And there's an example on the slide right here talking about the little things are the big things, reading with your children, and other things that can be done. We can move to the next slide, please. And finally, I want to touch on the COVID-19 early childhood response. Something that we're working closely with are the childcare providers in our community. And initially, only the childcare providers who were providing childcare to essential workers' children were able to remain open. So many had to close, and it was important for us to keep them going and supporting them in any way we could. We were able to leverage funds from many partners and funders in the community to make sure that the essential needs for the childcare providers were able to be distributed. And in that, knowing that many of them were hanging on by a thread. So at that time, there were only a couple hundred open, and we know today there are over 400 open because we were able to help them throughout the dire areas of the COVID pandemic. And then the other piece that we were able to do with the Ready by 5 millage funded agencies and organizations was try to shift and adapt and provide some flexibility for them during the pandemic and really listen to the providers because they were hearing from families, you know, on the front lines, knowing what was needed. So the ability to be flexible during this time, you know, has been essential. And I think we can go to the last slide. This quote came from one of the parents in one of the first listening sessions that we did. And I think it really captures what families and what parents are dealing with. And she said, "I have a master's in education and I cannot teach my own children. We have to realize that at a point, early childhood education can't all be done online." These are the types of nuggets and information that we're going to glean from these parent listening sessions, and I think they will help all of us. Thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you so much, President Valdez. The early childhood system is stronger because of the work that you've been doing. Thank you for your commitment to the youngest citizens of our community. So next, we're going to hear from Director Rando. Wendy Rando is the director of the Essential Needs Task Force. ENTF is the lead convening partner in home and family stability, in the home and family stability portion of KConnect's continuum and supports families' basic needs.
Good morning. Thanks so much, Brittany, Brandy. It's such a pleasure to be able to present to all of you. We have updates from ENTF. We've already heard many of the great things that our partners have been engaged in, and I'm so happy to be working in alignment and support of all of you. Next slide. As a quick refresher, ENTF is a convening partner with a focus on essential needs systems in Kent County. Our focus areas are transportation, food and nutrition, energy efficiency and utilities, economic and workforce development, and housing through the Coalition to End Homelessness. Our staff team is small, myself, Brianne, Courtney, and Emily, and that's because all of our partners are immersed in the systems every day. We're wrapping up the strategic planning process and moving directly into implementation, led by our revised mission, which you can see here. It states to advance equitable outcomes for all people in Kent County. We build relationships, foster understanding in the community, reject biased assumptions, and lead policy and process change within systems of transportation, food and nutrition, energy efficiency, economic and workforce development, and housing. As I move through our updates this morning, you'll hear and see our planning and implementation efforts laid out to describe both what we have done in the last several years and where we're going to get us through the next stages of the pandemic and advancing over the next 3 years. A quick glimpse at our composition. We have 5 subcommittee areas that I previously mentioned. You'll notice that these are grouped by systems, and you'll recognize the interconnectedness of all of these systems. In total, we have 135 organizations that are active in ENTF meetings and initiatives, and 102 of those organizations are outside of the Coalition to End Homelessness. Many of these organizations have multiple staff members engaged at various levels to remain connected to the information and to leverage specific skills and areas of expertise. Of those 135, we have 47 organizations active in 2 or more subcommittee areas. For the last few years, we've been sending semi-regular email updates to our partners and community stakeholders. This year, we formalized that process and now send weekly resource updates. We have 536 people receiving these weekly resource updates with a 40% open rate, or around 214 people opening these emails weekly. As many of you know from your involvement in the design and launch of KConnect, there was intentionality around alignment of systems efforts to avoid unnecessary duplication. To that end, discussions led to the acknowledgement that ENTF would serve as the Home and Family Stability Work Group of KConnect. In this act, we are recognizing that children and families cannot thrive in their school and work environments without access to basic needs. And given what we've learned more pointedly in the last 5 years, that statement should read without equitable access to basic needs. To serve and partner with KConnect in this way, ENTF aligns efforts and collaborates for strategy design and implementation. We inform the other work groups of changes in our related issue areas. We share data, and we lean into specific projects and partnerships focused on shared objectives. As part of our strategic design process, and given the need for clarification of ENTF's role in the community, we reached out to our broad stakeholder group and received over 120 responses that helped us identify and confirm our ENTF values. Those 6 distinct values emerged and were validated. It was overwhelmingly evident that equity is the core value of our work among our stakeholders. It is a term that resonates with everyone as vital to our work, that we must root all our efforts in equity, and that any questions regarding the direction, fit, process, or actions of our work will go back to this value. To ensure this commitment to equity runs through all of our work, we are practicing intentionality in discussing what equity means and looks like, learning about historic and pervasive inequities, and reshaping systems to improve equitable outcomes. Overall, our newly established values will not only guide our work, but also help us stay accountable to our work. So while we were establishing our values, we were also working toward clarification of our roles or the functions we serve in Kent County. Thinking of this as a simplified theory of change, you can see that our action areas support outcomes, which in turn lead to our long-term mission impact. We have identified these action areas as connecting, community learning, action and advocacy, and data and understanding. Connecting leads to new and strengthened relationships. Community learning leads to an understanding of essential needs issues. Action and advocacy leads to policy and process changes. And data and understanding leads to decisions based on information. Each of these areas informs the others, and outcomes push us toward our overall impact. With this simple guide for ENTF as a whole, each subcommittee area will be creating their own detailed theory of change by which their focused goals are identified and accomplished. Data and understanding is about building knowledge of the community's current state using quantitative data, diverse experience, and intentional storytelling. Advocacy and action is ensuring equitable systems by holding leaders accountable and advocating for policy and process change. Community learning is building capacity, competence, and confidence, and supporting community in their development and leadership. And connecting is supporting community in building and strengthening relationships, partnerships, and collaborative efforts. Within our new plan, each of these areas has detailed tactics and measures. We'll take a look at some ways in which these action areas have played out in the last few years and what we are engaging in as we move forward. Our data and understanding area has been engaged in a great deal of work around capacity building. We have benefited from amazing partnerships with Calvin University Center for Social Research, Inclusive Performance Strategies, the Johnson Center, Peterson Consulting, Conversation Matters, Liz G Strategy, and many others. Incredible experts who have gotten us where we are today. We have executed a workforce development data sharing agreement with 16 agencies, 11 of which have provided data to the collective. In several of the subcommittees, we have and continue to work through shared definitions. In the Coalition to End Homelessness, we have disaggregated data by race and have used population-specific data to help revise the coordinated entry policies and processes. In multiple subcommittees, we are intentionally building capacity at the organizational and systems level through disaggregation of data, specific processes, and data-focused events, self-assessment and planning, and we're asking important questions around who owns community members' data and stories. We have completed many data projects and pilots and are pushing into the next phases of that work. I'm thrilled to let you know, if you do not know already, that in May, we added a new data analyst position to our ENTF team to lead this great work moving forward. Many of you know Emily Madsen, and many more of you will surely meet her in the upcoming months. Advocacy and action is an area in which we have been building capacity in order to fully implement the steps necessary for systems change. The basis of this work began with our equity toolkit designed for the workforce development group and shared across systems. This and other resources help us ensure that we have a broad understanding of the context of advocacy work. We have engaged in and hosted events and opportunities around civic engagement that impact our community as a whole. We have learned from experts and established priorities in our advocacy efforts. And through trainings, forums, and panel discussions, we are engaging in policy impact planning to educate community and decision makers about the planned and unintended consequences of policy and funding decisions. Community learning has historically focused on our organizational partners, and as we move forward, we'll expand to co-designed learning opportunities with residents with lived experience alongside traditional direct service providers. We have a formal systems navigator curriculum with training offered annually. We have a newly released smart practices report and recommendations to guide our collective practices and advancement as a community of leaders. We frequently offer awareness building panels and presentations with experts in various fields. We are discussing and planning for our new co-designed community engagement methodology. We have fostered leadership growth among many regular subcommittee members, and we have acknowledged and continue to encourage and host self-care and support events, the most recent being our community care circle with the amazing Shannon Cohen. Finally, connecting is the action area that was highlighted most frequently as a benefit of being involved with ENTF. We open spaces and bring people together to discuss important issues, share resources, troubleshoot challenges in our daily work, and build partnerships rather than redundancies. In just the last year, our navigator convenings have been attended by over 175 individuals across a variety of social service systems, case managers, career coaches, community health workers, resource navigators, and many more, with an average of 51 people per convening. We frequently facilitate introductions between people new to the systems and trusted allies and experts. We share weekly updates, as mentioned before, with a reach of over 500 people. We share weekly updates, as mentioned before, with a reach of over 500 people and a 40% open rate. We have increased our Facebook presence to 439 followers and see regular increases in our level of engagement with our posts. And we have helped establish effective partnerships and collaborative work. You've seen some pictures of our meetings and events, and you have repeatedly heard the themes of partnership, community, sharing, and understanding. In order for our systems and outcomes to be equitable, we must work effectively together. So relationships are essential. Here are a few examples of the strength and value of our collaborative work. We are extremely grateful for the thought partnership and openness of all of you in this meeting and beyond. COVID-19 pandemic is certainly not something we had direct experience with previously. That said, we had some lessons to fall back on as we came out of the previous year into 2020. We were significantly challenged as systems during the 2019 polar vortex. It forced us to ask difficult questions about our roles as systems conveners and forced our partners to ask difficult questions about their role in providing services. And as we have learned about, the Civic Lab models of systems change through our friends at the KConnect backbone team, we must challenge our thinking of how we best impact the community. Next slide, thank you. As an immediate response to the emergence of COVID and the stay-at-home orders, we facilitated a mapping project and resource sharing coordination. We worked closely with several emergency management teams across the county and expanded our contact networks even further. What began as calls almost daily for food access efforts has now shifted to weekly calls. We have had over 160 people representing 74 organizations participate in ensuring that food resources are available to all residents. Additionally, we worked on the procurement and distribution of PPE and supplies to ensure the safety of our partners as they continued to serve the growing numbers of people in need during this critical time. We've begun to convene partners and community around the issue of digital inclusion. Though several efforts are underway, we recognize that there is not currently a way for all aspects of the system to come together for information and strategy development. So we are exploring what it looks like to guide those efforts. We are hosting and encouraging difficult conversations around race, injustice, multiple systems of oppression, and what equity means. We are working on clarifying our role in the housing spectrum moving forward, and the Coalition to End Homelessness embarks on their strategic planning efforts, and the Housing Stability Alliance forms a new backbone entity. And finally, we are focusing on a new shared future. Rather than exiting the pandemic and returning to normal, we all know that normal was not just or equitable. As lead convening partner in essential needs and the Home and Family Stability Work Group for KConnect, ENTF has an opportunity to address the continued barriers that have been revealed more and more of late. We can see more clearly and work together across sectors and systems to effectively address our community's essential needs. Thanks very much for your time and partnership.
There are so many people that are actually literally clapping their hands right now and making comments in the chat, just affirming the wonderful and deep work that you and your team are doing, Wendy. So thank you so much. Your work to support the basic needs of everyone in our community is so important to the success of everyone who falls along KConnect's prenatal to career continuum. So thank you again for the work that you and your team are engaging in. I agree, great leadership. So shifting gears a little bit, lead convening partners are critical system building partners along the prenatal to career continuum. As a reminder, these partners include First Steps Kent in the early childhood space, Kent ISD supporting K-12 education, and you'll hear from them after the break. To College through college in the post-secondary space, Talent 2025 focused on career development, Essential Needs Task Force working to improve access to basic needs. We learned this today after hearing about the years of system building in Kent County and the challenge and opportunities that this year has created. We are going to break out into groups to discuss the questions on the screen. Let's see if they're on the screen. Yep. We're going to break out and have dialogue and discussion about the questions on the screen, and we will see you in about 15 minutes. So please respond to the prompt to go to your breakout room where you'll meet your virtual team captain. It was like whiplash, leaving a breakout session to come back to the main room again. And so we want to give you a second to eyeball the questions that are on the screen. And we want to tee up table captains, because sometimes what happens is we get into the breakout rooms and there's some really rich dialogue that takes place. And we don't want that information, those nuggets of wisdom to be trapped there. We want to hold space for table captains or the designee to be able to share some of those nuggets so the whole group benefits from it. So the questions that you are grappling with, you should see on the screen. We're going to ask table captains to unmute and share a little sound bite. And if that means table captain, you come on and then you pitch it to somebody that was in your breakout room, that's cool too. But let's hold space to share the wisdom that was expressed in the breakout rooms around these questions. So to start us off, I'm going to call on some of my friends because I know they won't be angry with me. So Deanna, you knew I was coming to you, right?
I get to start.
Right.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I am going to pass it over to Julie Ridenauer, who's going to share a couple of highlights.
Thank you.
Deanna, I don't have our notes, so I am
okay.
without information. I'm going to toss it back to you because I don't have.
Sounds great. Let me pull up that document. So a couple of the highlights from the first question were that members of our group loved hearing about Talent 2025 and really seeing that leadership in DEI from the CEO spot and from that C-suite. We appreciated the great examples of operationalizing strategies. And then jumping toward opportunities, we're looking forward to seeing and hearing some results, some outcomes, how COVID impacted the work, what pivots we had to make, what we're learning from some of those challenges. And to bump back to the first one, appreciated hearing discussion on the housing and prenatal work and what work is going on there. We appreciated, or an opportunity is linking various partners, topics, initiatives. As we know, housing and education, prenatal health are not disparate topics in silos. They impact families at the same time. And so this recession hits different sectors differently, but really would love to see some connections there. And then we didn't spend as much time on that last question.
That's okay. That's okay. And thank you for sharing that. We want to tee up all the table captains for what Deanna just did. And I will take the pressure off and say, you can give like 1 minute's worth. So let me kick it over to another table captain. What might have been some of the themes of your dialogue around these questions? My friend Neil, we're coming to you. Other table captains, be ready. And again, if that means you pitch it over to somebody else that's in your group, your designated speaker, that's cool. So Neil, is that you or someone else?
I'll have at it. We had the number of first timers, all of whom had existing connections to First Steps or ENTF, and yet a lot of pleasant surprise expressed about the level of recognizing interconnection among the various silos and focus areas, and appreciation for the way that KConnect and the lead convening partners are coming together to create sort of interconnected approach. A lot of applause for elevating the voice of Mariah, our first year student in college. And in terms of opportunities, emphasis on creating space for organizations led by people of color to lead and determine their own future, providing resources to that and elevating the voice of lived experience further. Encouragement to consider opportunities for meetings like this one to occur outside the workday so that folks who have full-time jobs can participate. I think also I was struck by Kathleen's remark that it's so important to hear a voice like the parent with a master's in education that can't teach their own child. So affirmation for the communication that's happening about the voice of the people with lived experience.
Thank you. I'm hearing some themes. I want to see if Dr. Christopher, I think she has previously been a table captain, and if not, certainly pitch it over back to me, Dr. Christopher, or someone else. Might you want to share some of the nuggets that you heard in your group?
I can share a little. I wasn't the table captain, but I talked a lot, so I guess that'll be enough. One of the things we mentioned was just urgency. With all that we're doing, and there's been a lot that has been accomplished behind the scenes, but it's really time to start making an impact. One of the things we were concerned about with housing was that it wouldn't take so long to form this new organization, that a lot of damage would be done already by the time it's up and running. So that was something we discussed as well. But other than that, pretty pleased to see some movement and on the back end, the research end, and ready to move forward with some more practical applications of what we've learned in our community.
Thank you. Again, some of the themes that I'm hearing is that it's nice to be able to come to the table to convene. And at the end of the day, what people really want is some action and some change and transformation that's sustainable, and wanting people who are closest to the pain to be closest to the power to actually transform while acknowledging the interlocking systems. Let me hear from one or two more people. Sergio, I know you don't want me to put you on the spot, and yeah, I'm going to ask if there's anything that you want to share, friend, and if you want to pitch it back to me or someone else, that's cool too. Might you want to unmute? Any nuggets?
From our group, I wasn't the one designated to do it in our group. It was Dr. Nkeche, but some of the things I'll talk about what I mentioned is some opportunities. For example, for the undocumented community, there was the need to create La Lucha Fund to provide assistance to the undocumented community. And it was organizations not necessarily participating in KConnect that made that happen. So there's open opportunity for that to happen. Children, even US citizen children that are impacted by their parents being undocumented, so mixed status families. Other opportunities to find funding for the different initiatives that are being discussed, looking at how our municipalities use their budgets and how much they allocate for things like safety. So those are a couple of things. Dr. Nkeche, if you want to fill in the rest.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Sergio. Dr. Eze, certainly want to hold space for your voice and some of your reflections. Are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sergio. You covered that. I think another thing that came up for us, we were very impressed that our community is really beginning to walk the talk in terms of diversity, seeing a good number of people of color on the lead organizations that are convening to tackle this was very impressive, and we want that to see that continue. Another thing that came up that haven't been mentioned is we would like to see, it's an opportunity, we would like to see improved communication. Most people or most other group did not know that some university students were struggling with food. I guess we should have, but when you're dealing with your own issues, unless somebody else bring it up, you don't know. Maybe we could have done more if we know about that. So improve communication, and also the opportunity to make sure that there is a good transition or hands-off between the different groups that are working. So the ENT are doing great job, but how can they inform other groups of what is bubbling up? Not for them to solve it, but at least we're wondering maybe if KConnect will have some kind of a dashboard where this is happening and people will be able to go there and see what is bubbling up from different groups. And I do support what Dr. Christopher talking about in terms of urgency. I'm an early childhood person. I know we're talking about food, but a child who's 4 years old right now is not getting preschool education next year. If we decide to come together and say, oh, this is what we're going to do, that child is already in kindergarten. If I'm hungry and I'm not getting food, my brain cells and everything is already messing up. So that sense of urgency, we can keep on talking about it. And kudos to KConnect trustee for beginning to own this and say, you know what, there is structural racism and we can be talking about it behind the door. We need to bring it out and embrace it and do something about it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank each of you for sharing some of the nuggets that were expressed in your breakout rooms and for emphasizing that it's time out for talk. As Andrew mentioned earlier, it's time for us to make this personal and actually create the change and the transformation that is so needed. And some of what that looks like is having people of color at the top levels and throughout the organization and places of power to do some of the hard changing, transformative work that's needed. And remembering those folks that our systems have pushed to the margin. And so what's coming up next is a break. Specifically, we're going to take a 5-minute break before we hear from Ron Kaler from Kent ISD, and then we'll move into the next portion of our agenda. So I see it as a 5-minute break. KConnect, please correct me if I'm wrong. Yep, here we go, 5-minute break. See you in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Staff and work with us on the diversity issues that we struggle with in our shop. And she has been remarkably helpful in having those courageous conversations in our organization. So I just realized that I launched into my conversation without adequately identifying and recognizing her success and her importance to our organization. And to speak about this superintendent search, our board is to find the very best talent to lead the organization that we've briefly summarized here for you. As you can see, it's a large and influential organization that needs strong leadership and vision, and a vision that and mission and goals that are developed in concert with organizations like the ones you serve, so that we can be sure to reach all segments of our community and to provide the services that are necessary to help our young people and all of us succeed. So our board is in the process of selecting a search firm. I can tell you that the firms that we've interviewed have been clearly directed that we want a diverse field of candidates and we want to include our community in the process of selecting this superintendent. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is we are going to hold focus groups internally and externally. So when I say internally, I mean internally to Kent ISD and the school community, with individuals to express their points of pride in Kent ISD and the things that we're doing well, the challenges that they see ahead for Kent ISD, and most importantly, the characteristics that they feel are most necessary and valued in a new leader for Kent ISD. And we will also be conducting these focus groups externally in the broader community as well, to make sure that we get the input of all of you and others. We will also be making available to all of you an online survey so that everyone, and those who are not able to participate in a focus group will have the opportunity to express themselves as well. And so then our search firm, they will create a profile of the characteristics of the new superintendent and a report to the board on what our community has said, what the community has said they value in the work that Kent ISD does, and what our community has said in terms of the challenges that we need to address and that we need to prepare for looking forward so that we can fully meet the needs of our community as best as we can.
Thank you, Ron. We are now going to move into our first breakout session to provide feedback on the first question. That question is, based on what you know about Kent ISD, what do you think they do well, and or what are you most impressed with? Your table captains will facilitate the process of gathering your input before returning to the room to share your feedback. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
I was in Veronica's group. I think I got bumped out.
I can put you back in it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so welcome back. We're going to take some time to give feedback to the Kent ISD on the question on the screen. Please try to avoid repeating what other groups communicated during this period. If you support a group's feedback, please indicate it in the chat box or with a thumbs up reaction.
I think we might want to give people a little bit more time to come back and maybe repeat that in a minute, because I think a lot of people hadn't come back yet.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Yep, it looks like everyone's back now.
Okay, let's do that again. Welcome back, folks. We're going to take some time to give feedback to the Kent ISD on the question on the screen. Please try to avoid repeating what other groups communicated during this period. If you support a group's feedback, please indicate in the chat box or with a thumbs up reaction. Katie will call on people.
You can also feel free to just jump in if you have anything to say, just unmute, and then if you can say your name, that would be great.
I'll speak up for our group. I'm Mary Reed Kelly. Our group talked about praise for KISD's certification and skills-based programs and training and network and tech-based topics, and the ability to prepare students who may not go to four-year college. Another person mentioned they're good community partners and the leadership and staff are all competent and good representatives within the community.
Sergio, we're going to focus on what the ISD is doing right. And then in the next feedback section, we're going to focus more on the opportunities, I think. But I think if you have something about either one of them, you could feel free to go ahead and share it.
Maybe I could encourage Carrie from our group to speak up about her experience with the Tech Center.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you.
So my son attended 2 years at KCTC, and he went through the mechatronics program. Part of that requires an internship with an industry partner, and he spent his last semester of his senior year working at Gill Industries. They offered him a job right out of high school, and are paying for him to go to GRCC to get some advanced training and 2 years worth of additional education. And he had no thought about what he wanted to do after high school until he went to KCTC. He wasn't really that traditional student that, sat down and loved all the English classes and all of that. And it really, it moved his path forward in life. It made a huge difference for him. And I appreciate that's available to students in the county. I think it's a strong program, and I think KISD does a great job leading that and making that available.
Hi, everybody. I'm Deanna Rolfs. Or Sergio, were you going to jump in? We start at the same time, eh?
Go ahead.
Okay. Our group had some great conversation around what we're impressed with at Kent ISD, including excitement to hear mention of the intentional recruitment of staff of color and leaders of color, praise for the important oversight role, and that was mentioned in a positive light when crises occur in local districts, to offer resources and support, to lobby in Lansing and with the feds. Super impressed with early childhood work. There were a lot of ways that showed up in our conversation. Gratitude was mentioned for hiring a DEI and belonging director, of course, snaps to Brandy, and supporting that work and leading that work. And then it was also mentioned gratitude for the way that Kent ISD leaders, including superintendent, early childhood directors, serve on local nonprofit boards, in particular First Steps Kent.
So what we heard in our group is that the ISD does a good job following the lead of industry and determining what type of students to produce for the market. And also they do a good job with their branding, reaching out to community, also like with the skill center. And then one of our members was impressed with the ISD reaching out to community about this. It's a critical role for community.
This is Jamie DeLue from Group 5, I'll share. So overall, our group was just super impressed by the scope of services and diversity of communities reached by Kent ISD. One example was that Kent ISD leveraged their grant writer for a grant that the Kent County Human Trafficking Coalition put out that's very preventative in nature. So they collaborated in that way, which was super helpful. And it was actually the only application in Michigan to actually receive the Human Trafficking Youth Prevention Demonstration Grant. Also, people from the group had experiences with the superintendent and just kind of KISD in general, just being very open to listening and problem solving, open to community feedback. So one person had a son whose math class was actually canceled, but a group of parents got together and actually talked with Ron, and they actually figured out that they could still continue the class virtually instead, to save us some of those cost savings of not having to have transportation and such. So those were our main ones. And then also, there was also discussion about how it was really great that this is a national search to just kind of open up the framework for who might be in the new position.
I can give an update from our group. I don't know what number it is, but adding on to what everyone has already said, we talked about many of those same areas of strength, but also talked about the adult education program and really about how great of a job they've been doing under Ugi Lamar's leadership and seeing those connections to the community and community partnerships. We also talked about data, both through MTSS and the support for local districts to begin looking at data to drive their work in combination with the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging work that's been done through Brandy's leadership and then filtering to the schools through that, through those different avenues, as well as the greater data work that Sunil has been able to do more at a systems level, and are really interested in seeing more of that data moving forward.
I think we could, this is Jaren, we could echo a lot of the same things. Maybe just an additional thing as the lifting up the early childhood programs and the Strengthen Bright Beginnings and the Great Start Readiness program, and especially with their pivots in COVID-19.
Katie, have we heard from all the groups?
Yep, I think unless somebody else wants to jump in right now, I think that we could go ahead and start with discussion question number 2.
Okay, so now we're going to go into our second breakout session to provide feedback on the second question, and here it is. What are some of the potential opportunities for Kent ISD to consider going forward? Your table captains will facilitate the process of gathering your input before returning to the room to share your feedback. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes. Okay.
Yep, Olivia, everybody's back.
Okay, great. So welcome back. We're going to take some time to give feedback to Kent ISD on the question on the screen. Please try to avoid repeating what others groups communicated during this period. If you support a group's feedback, please indicate it in the chat box or with thumbs up. Any group want to go first?
I'll go for group 1, Olivia. We saw actually several opportunities. There were probably roughly 10. The first is the opportunity to be more creative in recruiting teachers, administration, et cetera, and particularly staff of color, and to practice more diversity in that recruitment process or those recruitment processes. As well as to find a way for those who would like to transition into the classroom, perhaps from peripheral jobs and positions, to do so. And so encouraging alternate certification. We also saw there was an opportunity for KISD to diversify its leadership at the elected leader position, so the Board of Trustees for the ISD, as well as the cabinet level positions within the district. And for the ISD to lead an area-wide opportunity, thinking much more broadly in terms of recruiting diverse teachers and helping to take the mantle of leadership up there. Also investing in intentional anti-racism and equity work with predominantly white teaching and administrative staffs throughout the county. We saw an opportunity to continue the relationship with the First Steps Board of Directors via the superintendent and early childhood directors, and make sure they're present at those tables. We also saw education as in the state of Michigan as being largely decentralized, and encouraged KConnect to take a position of leadership rather than service as they articulate in their mission and purpose and on their outside signage. We saw an opportunity to focus on decreasing poverty density by race and helping to diversify our community broader. And we also saw an opportunity to continue to grow the multi-tiered system of support And it's used for districts to prove that they aren't racist, and it should actually help students see the bias and change that in an organic way. We also, credited them for their work on early childhood, but also want to encourage them to continue to build a system that's based on racial equity. So those are the opportunities that we saw for the ISD.
Oh, that was a lot. Thank you so much, Julie. Ron,
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I was just going to say we had Ron Kaler in our so all those things were said very much in his presence.
And as such, Ron, would you like to respond to any of those?
Only to say that I like the thinking, and I think there is more we can do. It does require, each one of our districts is their own unit of government, though, and so it takes work to make sure that you can bring them all in and help them. But we've done that for years, and I'd like to think that we can do more of that to be of assistance to them.
That's a good observation, especially that you, in that you believe you've done this already. I'm wondering, do you see how it might be done differently based on some of the comments that were just made?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have to, I think some of our districts, I think we can learn from some of our districts. My guess is that, Kentwood and Grand Rapids in particular have made concerted efforts to reach out to historically Black universities and others to try to find a more diverse teaching staff. I think we might be able to do better if we were to do that on a regional basis. I also think that perhaps like we do in data, for example, where we host applications and we are the data warehouse for most of our districts and for other counties, we might be able to help more in HR as well. And so that would bring together our HR efforts.
Great, thanks, Ron. Another group, maybe group 2, let's go in order.
I have no idea what group number we were.
I think we're 6, Neil. That's okay, we can jump in here. So we wanted to echo some of what Julie said as well, particularly those diversity points you made about the need to represent our students at the front of the classroom too. We talked a little bit about the challenges around teacher recruitment, as well as encouraging our students themselves to see themselves as future teachers. And then we also had a really interesting conversation, and Neil, I might hand this back over to you to share a little bit about what it might look like for us to really set a world-class example of what, really focused effort around engaging all-star, recently retired teachers of color to help us as kind of establish some best practices and really kind of use that knowledge base as something that could set our area apart as a leader there. Neil, do you want to add a little bit more? I think you had some eloquent points there too.
Well, Mark and company know I've been ideating about this ever since it first came across the data and capacity work group agenda from the 4th through 12th work group and high school to career work groups. Particularly seeing the math that says, I think you repeated it, Megan, that it's going to take every single teacher of color produced by the entire state of Michigan for 5 years to get us to the goal that we've set. So the key thing to do is figure out how to ramp up the production rate far beyond that rate. And the best thing I can imagine is what I call the California Pizza Kitchen model, which is California Pizza Kitchen, which is not the model business in every respect. They're losing ground right now, but I watched them install a new franchise in North Carolina, and they brought in their most charismatic, skillful customer service people from all over the country wearing name tags with their hometowns on it. And they paired them up with the local talent, and they had that place up and running and humming in its very first day because all the pros came in from all over. And it's that idea of how would we bring and franchise, empower, make comfortable, protect, provide hospitality to all of the talent that we would need to create a true magnet that be sustainable and would have retention power. And I'll wax one more 30-second segment, fantasy here. Higher Ed Federation to create affiliation to higher ed for people to teach in college classrooms while they're doing that, and a luxury hotel to live in. Honestly, we're going to have plenty of hotel rooms, I predict.
Thank you, Neil.
Well said,
And then oh, sorry, go ahead. So Olivia, just to wrap up our last point there, we also talked, as Julie's group did, about a shift from service provision really to leadership place. We talked also about the mental health initiatives that have been really making grounds in a 5-year pilot that Kent ISD was part of, and the opportunity to be able to disseminate those further by really, we had this additional funding come in from the state for mental health services. And a lot of that just ended up passed through to districts without the opportunities to show them what it could look like if they instituted some of those multi-tier systems of support, which Julie's group mentioned, and some of those trauma-informed practices that we know are really critical to help students achieve their full potential. So just echoing some of that as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you both. Ron, is there anything you'd like to say to respond to this group?
I just really appreciate the input, and really also appreciate that you're so engaged in and want to see Kent ISD and its staff get better.
Okay.
Go next for our group. So I'm going to drop a link on here on the chat for everyone to take a look at. That's a document that I'll discuss in a bit. I want to first, discuss what we talked about in our group. It seems like our section is, okay, here it is. So we talked about the diversification of staff, as other people mentioned, the health, mental health initiatives, but we also talked about working on the culture that exists in the ISD. Right now is an excellent time to either continue on the same path or change directions with the hiring of the new superintendent. And what that could look like is somebody that could bring in implement a culture change to make staff that work there, that are people of color, feel welcome, and we can keep them there. Also provide funding for the Native American programs. And then the ability for the ISD to connect with different communities and serve different communities. Opportunity for the ISD to be creative. The understanding the challenges with COVID, I think somebody already mentioned that. And then regarding the process itself, that's also another opportunity to make the process transparent, to ensure that the people that are able to provide input into the process are representative of the community that technically can receive services from the ISD, and then growing the number of people across the county that are receiving services. The hiring process could be one that is used to build trust with community, with the district, and build the relationship. So the capacity of the ISD to reach different communities. And this could be the first step in doing that. Thinking about this as a person of color, a person that could be someone that's culturally competent and somebody that can lead, that has experience leading systems through change. The link that I shared there, I think, let me see, I want to make sure I didn't miss anything from our group. And then with school boards and administration, they should be represented in the demographic. So the link that I shared on there for your review is a link that a group of us that are members of Latinx GR, that's the Hispanic Center, the Hispanic Chamber, the Latino Network, the Latino Community Coalition, and the Latina Network, came up with as some priorities to share with the group. We encourage you all to check those out, look them over. Those I want to say that while we focus mainly on the Latinx community, I think that a lot of this translates to other communities of color. And I want to highlight the Asian community that is often left out of this conversation, and the Native American community. And then there's other folks, I think, that can speak to this.
Thank you so much. So we're about down to 3 more minutes. Is there anything else from other groups that we haven't mentioned that you want to share?
Yeah, so I don't know what number group we were. My apologies. This is Courtney Myers-Keaton, though, and we discussed a lot just about the need for transparency, like in all organizations and schools and throughout the ISD, of the staff positions and their demographics and their wages and how they all relate to each other. You know, I think that it's great to see what the overall composition is of an organization or of the ISD. But it also should be broken down by what the actual positions are, because we don't know, is that custodial staff? Are those teachers? There's just a lot of other items that that play into it. And the wages are also really important, we think, too. And that the ISD could really have a leadership role in increasing the transparency across the board within districts and bringing them along in this, so that we can start to visually see who's being represented where, knowing that representation matters, and representation doesn't only matter for people of color, matters for everyone, because we know that everybody benefits from diversity, not only people of color, right? You know, white people benefit from diversity too. So we aren't looking to make schools and districts only more diverse of their specific city, but of the entire region, quite honestly. So we know that Cedar Springs is predominantly white, right? But they should be making it diverse to represent Kent County, not just Cedar Springs.
Great comments.
And piggyback on that super quick, I was group 6, and specifically around that leadership stuff that Courtney mentioned, I heard from my group a lot that they'd love to see the ISD doing a lot more coordination, that the ISD offers some great resources, but that they could be more proactive in sharing those resources and taking more of a leadership role in some of this work that needs to happen. For example, one of the examples that was given was all of the technology requests that came after COVID-19 to philanthropy. And those depended so much, right, on which districts had the access to resources to be able to send in those requests. Maybe they had a grant writer, things like that. Not everybody has that equal access. And so just thinking about ways that the ISD could help coordinate some of that. And then the other piece that we talked about related to the superintendent search in particular, along with everything else that Sergio said, 2 things. One, thinking about the staff of the ISD as they, are positioned to share resources, share information, making sure that they have the training to be able to do that in districts that are really diverse, right? That are high in people of color, or that have a lot of specific needs. If they're going to be the ones that are kind of coordinating some of those knowledge and learning opportunities, they need to be exemplary, right? In the training that they're able to provide. And that's, that extends to the ISD staff, to their board, to the HR department, all of those spaces. And then specific to community feedback, thinking about who's on not only who's able to give feedback, right, in this process, in terms of like making sure that it's available, in languages that are necessary, through mediums that are accessible, but also who has the decision-making power, right? Who's on the hiring committee? How do they get appointed to the hiring committee? Communities of color should be given not only the opportunity to share their experiences, but also some of that decision-making power.
Fantastic. Is that everyone, Katie?
Yeah. Well, our group didn't speak yet. I just we said a lot of that same stuff, but also in regard to COVID, the need for some standardization among districts, and then the leadership of maybe being prepared for if and when something like this is going to happen again, and that it affects the whole community. And the whole community, even those who aren't involved with GRPS, those who aren't students or teachers or parents of GRPS, need to understand the role and how we're all affected by these things.
Okay, I think we've done it. Ron, you can take the last word. Any comments you want to make to the groups?
Well, I want to thank you all for your input, and want you also to know that we will, reiterate how important that input will be to us as we work with the search firm to do this search. We'd appreciate it if you would, along with the document that Sergio presented, if you could, really help us think through all the groups that we should reach out to, so that we can make sure that we spread the survey as far as possible, and that we also reach the appropriate people in the focus groups so that they have an opportunity to participate. Please know that I'm not going to be a candidate for this job. That's one of the reasons that the board asked me to come out of retirement, because typically candidates for a new job, among the first things they want to know is there a strong internal candidate? A, at Kent ISD, and then B, within the superintendent's group that we serve. And so the board wanted to make sure that by bringing tired old Ron back, that they would be able to say, no, we don't have a strong internal candidate. We are interested in finding a new candidate out there who can represent the interests of our community and provide strong leadership. And so your input and input of other groups like this is very important. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Ron, and thank you all for participating. Please know that all of your responses were captured by your table captains and will be synthesized and delivered to the Kent ISD in the near future. I'd like to turn it over to Brandy and Stacy to close out the meeting.
Well, thank you, Interim Superintendent Kaler and Dr. Olivia Williams, for facilitating the rich dialogue that you illuminated. And we want to thank everyone on the call today for their time. We know that time is a commodity and that long meetings on Zoom can be exhausting. So at this time, I'd like to ask that you complete the APC evaluation that has been linked in the chat. We value your feedback and encourage you to include comments. Please take the next few minutes to complete the evaluation. Thank you again. The evaluation should be found in the chat box. Click the link.
All right. So in review of this morning we received an update on the Doulas of Color strategy from the prenatal to third grade work group. We learned more about the Housing Stability Alliance, how they're working toward developing a new backbone organization to operationalize the common agenda and roadmap that was recently released. We heard updates from 4 of our leading convening partners and provided feedback on the upcoming Kent ISD superintendent search. So thank you for spending this morning with us. Brandy?
Tech issue, sorry about that. So we want to make sure that we take this time to ask you to save the date. We want you to save the date for the May APC, which is on Friday, May 14th, 2021. Thank you again, everyone, for your time today, for engaging in the way that you did, and for rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work. We'll see you again in May.
Please make sure to fill out your evaluation. It's very helpful to us. Thanks.